Would you wear a shoe on your head? Of course you wouldn't wear a shoe on your head. A shoe doesn't belong on your head. A shoe belongs on your foot. A hat belongs on your head. I am a hat. You are a shoe. I belong on the head. You belong on the foot. Yes, so it is.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. Today we're going to talk about Snowpiercer from 2013, based on a French comic book from 1982 originally.
I don't have that in front of me. Sorry, go on.
By Jacques Lob and Jean-Marc Rochette. I'm your host, Kumar. My co-host is Jordan.
Hello.
Okay, so if you didn't know that this movie was based on a comic, that's totally understandable because the comic was never released in English until after the movie came out. So
correct.
It was published by Casterman in France. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but anyway, they're a huge European publisher, and then it was released by Titan in 2014, so about a year after the movie came out, is my understanding, initially. The weird thing about the comic, so there were sequels to the comic.
Right.
A few sequels which came out in 1999 and 2000. The really weird thing about the sequel comics is that they are drawn by the same person but written by different. Every single book is written by a different writer. So I've never seen that. Usually in comics you have a single writer and then the artists sometimes are interchangeable.
Right.
That happens sometimes, but I can't think of another example where it was the same artist the whole time and they just kept changing writers. I don't know who owns the copyright on it or what, but the way it looks like it was maybe the artist's idea in the first place. Maybe, I don't know what the background is to it. Then we've had a bunch of prequel series as well, like 3 or 4 of those or something. And those have been coming out as recently as like 2019.
Right.
And
I understand the film is now canon in those prequels.
What? Really?
No, you didn't know this?
No.
I can't give you a citation.
Okay.
But I believe that start material that's come out after the film has incorporated some elements of the film.
Okay, some elements I guess I can understand.
There's a difference between that and is now canon, I suppose.
Yeah, because there's elements. There's no way they could add up into, you know what I mean?
Sure. Well,
they're not compatible in lots of ways. There are lots of details.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get into that.
We'll get into that also. So we've only read the first book, which is called Escape. Right. The Titan Books Volume 1 is called Escape, and not only that, there's also a TV series that's been going for 3 or 4 seasons now.
Correct. Yeah, which I had no idea existed until.
Yeah, and it's I'm aware of its existence, but I'm like, I really like the way the movie stands. And it's hard for me to imagine 3 seasons of some TV show of this. Maybe it's good. I don't know, and I doubt we'll ever come around to it. To talk about it, but it's a head scratcher. Looking in from the outside without having seen any of it or read any of the prequel or sequel material.
Fair enough. Yeah, perhaps we'll do it for our 5th anniversary podcast.
Oh, yeah. We might get around to it. Yeah, we might. It might turn into that. We shall see. Okay, so basically this the story's about this. Okay, it's in the future. At some stage in the future, after Star Wars 5 has come out. Now, I can tell you this because they at one point they're looking at a movie and they're watching Star Wars 5, and does that mean so this came out in 1982? So it could mean Empire Strikes Back, or it could mean some future Star Wars 5. It's like
we've had a Star Wars 5. Well, in both reckonings, we've had a Star Wars 5.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. That's why it no longer really... We can't tell what the joke is.
Yeah.
Well, it's like there's a moment in Airplane 2 where they walk by a poster that's like Rocky 58 or something, and he's like this just super old man. So it could be like a gag. I'm assuming it's a gag. I think
that's a joke in Spaceballs as well, where it's Rocky 5000.
Oh, right. Maybe I'm thinking of Spaceballs.
Well, you don't see a poster.
Usually, this is a weird tangent, but I was listening to a podcast today about the parody of the chestburster scene from Alien, where it pops out and it does the Warner Brothers frog and sings "Hello, my darling, hello, my..." that bit, and I was like, oh yeah, and the podcaster's like, oh, which movie is that? I was like, that is Airplane 2, and they're like, no, it's Spaceballs. So
it is Spaceballs.
I could be totally wrong about the Rocky thing, because oh yeah, John Hurt. So we're okay. It wasn't totally off topic. Thank God. Thank God.
I brought it back.
We can bring it back. Okay, so this comic is about it's in the far future. There was some sort of climate weapon, and there was a big war of some sort, and the climate weapon was deployed, and it caused the planet to freeze over. And a few survivors managed to scramble onto this train, which is like 1,000 cars long, or 1,001 cars long.
1,000 cars long. Yes.
And those survivors and the train has to keep moving in order for them to maintain heat and stay alive, or something like that. If the train stops, they die, basically.
Yes, that's made clear in the text. Well, we've got a fan translation, haven't we? But yes, there's some ambiguity. I think the consensus seems to be that it was a weapon,
right?
And it's implied that it's hinted at in the text that the train might have been prepared as an escape route for the people that deployed the weapon, but it's only hinted at in a roundabout way.
I think they do say that. Somebody says that out loud.
Proloff says it.
Proloff says, okay, so
this is the protagonist, Proloff.
So we've got at the back of the train is like literally almost the cattle cars, almost literally. It's the poorest people live back there, and this guy Proloff escapes from the back. He's gonna make a rush for the front. I can't remember what his.
Well, he escapes from the back.
Yeah.
The back originally, as you say, they're like cattle cars. They've been attached.
Right.
Later on to carry food and sundries, and some people, desperate refugees, forced their way into those cars. In response to which, the people in the main part of the train closed it off.
Right. So this is actually an important point when we get to the movie later. So the front of the train actually doesn't know anything about the back of the train. It's like...
Correct.
It's so close up. They don't know what life is like back there. They don't know how many people there are. They don't know how squalid the conditions are. They're not really... They're just oblivious.
They don't know, and they don't care.
They don't know...
When
Proloff
Proloff escapes and climbs in through a window, everyone is... They're excited to meet him. Well, excited. They take him into custody. But someone is excited to meet him. It's the higher ups further up the train. So Proloff's journey is involuntary up the train, or at least partly involuntary. I think he's happy so long as he doesn't have to go back to the...
Right, exactly. Yeah, he wants to get out of there. He's kind of selfishly like, I'm not going back.
All he cares about is not going back to the end.
He doesn't
actually have a lot of agency.
Right, and he's like, he does not about rescuing the people in the back or anything like that.
No,
he just doesn't want to be there. That's right. Okay, and actually, that's kind of the back and the front. It's really interesting. It's like it's kind of like District 9. Like it's a very obvious parable for class distinction, and it's really a very... Maybe it's oversimplification to say it's kind of what you'd expect from a French comic book about class distinctions.
Written in the 80s with the...
Yeah, and like, the rich are up there eating their cake and we're suffering at the back or whatever, and this guy revolts from that escape. So as he's coming through, he meets this woman named Adeline Bello, and she's from the middle somewhere, and she's kind of like a social activist for poor people, or for the poor people at the back.
Yeah, she and her organization are campaigning for the integration of the people in the end of the train. Right. So they're aware of their existence, but and they are campaigning for them to be brought up into the main train so that they can, so that they're not suffering at the end. They can benefit from living in the main part of the train.
Right.
Which is interesting, isn't it? There's So there's in that sense the train of the comic is kind of organic in that respect. Like it's as a mirror of society. It has elements that we recognize from our own society. There's divisions amongst people. There's a political structure, with the president. There's a military which is separate from the president. So there's civil power and military power. People, there's a throwaway line that people barter to allow passage through their own carriages. So presumably certain elements of the state have total access to the train, like they're called the conductors, I think. So the conductors, these military people, and then you have people moving about the train under their own agency, and they sort of have to make their own arrangement with the people whose territory they move through. So it's a lot. It looks like a little society. Right. And I bring that up because there's a contrast later on with the film. That's why I brought that up. But we'll come to that.
Right. I think her Adeline's philanthropy is almost what you'd expect in a real. If this situation were really happening, it's hard to. Well, I don't know. I guess it depends on your perspective of humanity and whether you're fundamentally a pessimist or an optimist, or what you think people are like at heart, and whether they would cut people off and not care. And nobody in the front carriages cares about the back carriages, which is what the movie presents with us.
I'm not sure about that, but we'll come back to. But you're right. The people in the train in the comics. They, as you say, there's two schools of thought. There's the charity group, the NGO, who's in favor of saving them and integrating them into the train. And then you have the president, the guy that's in charge. He wants to cut them off. He wants to decouple those cars. Right,
but we don't know that at first.
We don't. It's a major spoiler. It's a reveal.
It's a reveal.
Is it? I am getting ahead of myself. But do you think, is it a reveal, or is it just the progression, kind of like the way the plot progresses?
I'll tell you, I was seduced by his speeches, because when they come up, sure. What was it? Proloff and Adeline end up. They're brought to the front of the train. They meet the president. The president's like, yeah, I know things are really bad. How are things back there? We've heard they're really bad. Okay, well, let's try to fix that. Let's try to bring the people from the back. Oh, the problem is that he says the train is slowing down because of the weight at the back. So basically they need to jettison those cars, so he needs to find a way to integrate the people from the back into the more frontward cars. And he wants Adeline's NGO to help them with this integration.
He wants Proloff as their guide.
As the spokesperson. And I was like, oh, actually these first class people aren't that hostile.
I've already spoiled it. They absolutely are.
They really are. Their whole plan is to send them back there and then cut them and the aid organization off.
Correct. The president sees the organization as a political threat, a threat to his power. Right. He sees them as his enemies, political enemies. So he plans to ruthlessly dispose of them, along with the problem that the extra cars represent in terms of the weight that's slowing down the train.
Right.
And it's all very sordid and unpleasant.
Was the train actually slowing down, or was that an excuse?
Yes.
Okay, it was. Okay.
Yes, it's. Or I'm pretty sure it is. And it's all. That's the one thing that about the comic. Everything's very real feeling.
Yes.
Everything's like it's messy. there's a lot of grotesque kind of details. The people in first class live kind of like decadent. Well, not just decadent, but sordid.
Like sexually perverse, like they're it's that's the best word, decadent. They're just living it up there. There's no moral.
It's not just the decadence of the ultra wealthy though. Is it like the train is like a bad place to live?
Right.
It's not. It's unpleasant.
Right. Even at the front.
Yeah, even at the front.
Yeah, because there's a good comparison with the movie there coming up too, because in the movie, the engineer's like, oh, it's not so great up here. We have our problems. But it's like, are you kidding? Like, compared to the back? No, it's not.
Their problems, in the movie, they brought their problems with them. Like, they're sinners, right?
Yeah.
They live above beyond their means. No, beyond their means. They live a consumptive life. They overconsume.
Right.
And it's strongly hinted that they killed the world with this weapon and then fled to the train.
That's right, because it was built specifically for the escape from the climate weapon.
Yes.
Right. Okay, that's right. Yeah, so there's that.
So they'd hoped to escape the world and live in paradise on the train. I think there's some lines about the train being the epitome of luxury.
Right.
Designed, for a gentler era, and these people clearly thought they were going to maybe transcend and live a beautiful life, but they absolutely don't. It's grimy. It's unpleasant, sordid.
Right.
For everybody. But especially for the people at the end of the train.
Yes, but the veneer is different at the front for sure, because it's like rich sordidness.
Yeah, rich sordidness as opposed to literal cannibalism.
Yes.
That's quite a devastating reveal in the comic, that the people in the rear are cannibals, because there's some foreshadowing. Proloff studiously refuses to talk about what life is like.
Right.
At the end. He just says he's glad to have left and that he has absolutely no intention of going back. And he has a budding romance with what's her name? The
Adeline. Yeah.
Adeline. He has a budding romance with her. She's curious about him, but he won't talk about it. And then of course it comes out why he won't talk about it. It's because everybody down there is a murderer and a cannibal, including him.
Right. Okay, so they start working their way through the train. They're captured. He's captured immediately by the military. And she's captured too. They shave their heads.
Yep. Because of infection.
Because of
infection.
And
fear of infection.
They suspect he might have some filthy disease as well. This is a key point.
Yes.
But they just kind of like, just because he's from the back, not because he's sick or acting anything like that. We go through some of the cars. We see there's like a botanical car where they're growing plants. There's like one where they're making food, I think.
There's a giant meat mother, which is like a single-celled organism or something that eats.
Yeah, like it's fake meat, like vat-grown meat or something.
It's vat-grown, perfect. It's vat-grown meat. It's even in a vat. And they just slice bits off it, and the more you slice off, the more it grows.
Yes, but it flinches whenever the blades touch it, he says.
Which is an interesting detail.
Oh my god. Okay, so
this train is powered by suffering.
Yeah, and we learned there's also a kind of religion based around the engine, in the engine giving them life coming from the front of the train, where all the resources come from, and also the motion of the train keeping them alive.
You can't have a post-apocalyptic story without a weird religion.
Right.
Preferably worshipping technology.
Right.
But yes, you're right. They and they're... I don't remember too many details about it, but they worship the engine, don't they? Or the great loco.
Yes. And we also learned that in the past there had, not too long after coming on the train, there had been an attempt to rush the front from the back. Like they had tried to... attack, and that rebellion had been put down.
Of course.
Yes,
you're right. Just the one. Yeah, there was a big push, but it failed.
Yeah. And we meet this guy who's kind of a record keeper, which allows us to learn a bit about how things got this way. Yeah, that's right. And Proloff says the bomb that destroyed the climate, and the record keeper says we never found out what was the cause of the catastrophe. So there's a bit of debate there. I guess it's a little bit open-ended.
It's hard to tell with the translation. We can't compare it.
Sure.
But Proloff is very cynical. So he's cynical about. He sees it as definitely being caused by. He's seen the worst of humankind. We know. And he absolutely believes that this was their bolt hole to kill the world and then live in luxury and indulge in perversions of a sexual nature.
Right. Okay, so they finally managed to overcome this colonel or sergeant that was leading them, and then people start dying of some disease. Right, so the assumption is that Proloff has actually passed something on to them, which has some kind of incubation period, which is different from person to person, so he's still alive. And they're dead. They managed to make it to the front of the train, and
or he's an asymptomatic carrier, perhaps.
Yes. They get to the radio booth where Adeline sends a message that says, you've been lied to, and they're going to try to decouple all the cars. And they get to the front. Okay, now I'm trying to remember what happens with the engineer. They shoot out some windows, which is a dumb move because then
Proloff goes mad. He doesn't seem to have a reason to shoot the windows. So they're making their way up to the engine. I forget why, but Proloff decides that they're going to go up to the engine.
Right.
Perhaps it was to get access to the radio, but then they're trapped by this military. Proloff. They've dragged the president with them, actually, I believe.
Yes,
haven't they?
That's right.
They've dragged him with them. They're in the penultimate carriage, the last one before the engine itself, and then Proloff goes mad and shoots out the windows for some reason.
Yes.
And then his companion dies
from cold. Yeah.
Because it's instantly freezing in the carriage.
Yeah.
And Proloff himself almost dies, but is dragged into the engine room by the conductor.
Right. Okay. And then
who saved him because he wants him to take over.
Yes. But then what happens? So he wants him to take over, and Proloff's like, "What?" And he kind of ends up taking over because this guy dies anyway.
The guy dies, and we go to a straight cut from one page to the next.
Yeah.
Proloff has full beard and hair, so it's all growing back. So it's a passage of many months.
Yeah.
And Proloff can. It's established by the engineer that you can observe the entire train from the first carriage.
Yeah.
And he says, this is, I need someone to take over. I'm getting old. The engine's getting old too, but it still runs, and it will continue to run as long as someone's here to keep running it and as long as it runs, humankind will run too.
Yeah.
And we cut to several months later. Proloff is alone. Most of the monitors have gone out, and those that are still working show nothing.
Right. So he may have killed everyone on the train by coming to the front.
Yes, it's implied that the disease he was carrying, plus the civil unrest that was caused when they announced the plan to decouple the final carriages with the enemies of the president on them, has caused the destruction of everyone on the train except for Proloff. He's alone.
And he hears a
rolling tomb.
And he hears a knocking on the door, and he wonders if it's Adeline.
I didn't have that page. Oh, mine just finishes. Sorry, just a second. There's a knocking at the door.
Yeah, did I send you the wrong file? Okay. Well, anyway, so yeah, he's because he says on page.
Oh no, he imagines it.
He imagines it. He imagines a knocking on the door, and he thinks it's Adeline. So he's losing his mind as well. And it has a kind of perfect nihilistic ending, and there's no way there could be any sequels or any need for prequels.
No, that's it, and that's where we stop. Yeah, but no, he's kind of like the angel of death. When he came out of the, he's like he came out of that squalor of that ignored part of the train and brought a disease with him.
Yeah.
Because of the ignorance and greed of the people on the train. It's a little bit like those vaccine-resistant strains of COVID that came out of the global south, because the rich all hoarded their vaccines. The rich countries all hoarded the vaccines, and it spread among people in the poorer countries. There's a topical reference for you.
We haven't mentioned the art at all, which we should, by Jean-Marc Rochette. It's stark about black and white and gray, which is
black and white.
Yeah, which is you would think ideal, and it really is. I mean, as a comic book goes, it's really ideal, and it's really great in the movie when you get those splashes of color at first, and then like really full-on primary colors later. Which we'll talk about. Yes. But it works for what it is. Otherwise, it's I don't want to say he's a journeyman artist. The art's very good. There's a few moments, like when Adeline dies, his Perloff's facial expression is very weird. His scream of like, oh, what's, she's dead or whatever, is really odd the way he draws it.
Yes.
But
I like the art, but I think it's quite claustrophobic.
Yes.
Even when they're in the rich sections, which I think adds to its kind of closed-in, oppressive, kind of overcrowded feel.
Yeah. And
it's kind of hard to know what's going on sometimes, I think, because it's so cramped.
That's true. Also, I think another thing is it's a bit hard to tell the military guys apart, because they're wearing their uniforms. It's in black and white, and the main characters have. I mean, he's done their faces very well. You can tell who's who. But some of the secondary...
It helps that Perloff is bald, but you can go on straight.
But I mean, the sergeant and the colonel, I'm like, is this guy from before, or that guy, or who's this one again? Doesn't matter. It actually doesn't really matter at the end. Those are details kind of dissolve and aren't that important, I guess. So it's decent. It's not the best, but it's pretty good.
It is good.
Is what I would say about it, and it does the job very well. You're right about the claustrophobia of it. It really does that job. And every chapter opens with the train plowing through the snow, piercing through the snow, you might say.
Yes, indeed.
And those are all really pretty effective drawings too, especially at the very end when it seems like he's doomed to live
through
alone.
The infinite white of an eternal winter rolls a train across the frozen planet, a train that never stops. From the fan translation, of course.
Yeah.
But it's very. Pretty grim.
Yeah.
He's all alone on this rolling tomb.
Yeah.
Pretty grim. I can't help but think that he's kind of a selfish character.
Yeah.
Like he's haunted, obviously.
Yeah.
But he's not moved by Gabrielle's plan to rescue the other people in the tale. He just wants to get away. He just wants to stay where he is and be safe.
Yeah.
It makes me think, he just didn't, and when and of course he starts spreading the disease, and he just doesn't care. Why should he care? But much like the generals,
he's not sure that he's spreading he's not sure he's the cause in the first place.
He doesn't care. He's not sure, and he doesn't care.
Right.
It's kind of his indifference.
Right.
I mean, he's suffered terribly, but his indifference kind of to people is part of what ends up destroying the microcosm of the world on the train, much like the indifference and greed of killed the real world, and then they fled to the train.
Right.
I think if there's a theme in the comic, it seemed to me, it's that how important it is to be not indifferent to the plight of your fellow man, to love your fellow man, even if they're murderous cannibals,
right,
living in the darkness.
Right.
A different message, I think, from the film.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about?
Yeah, let's move on. So this came out in 2013, directed by Bong Joon-ho. Spoiler right
Parasite fame, Oscar-winning director.
Parasite later, but I had seen The Host.
I saw that too,
and I loved it. and then I saw Snowpiercer, and then I saw Okja, which was a Netflix release, which also had...
It's about the giant pig, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. It's about the giant pig. And then I ended up watching The Host again with my son, but I had not seen Parasite until last weekend. I had a window of opportunity, and I was like, oh, I better watch this before rewatching Snowpiercer, because it was a gap, and I hadn't.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you did that, because although I saw The Host, I haven't seen Parasite.
Okay. Anyway, I love Bong Joon-ho, and spoiler, I love Snowpiercer. The first time I saw it, which would have been like 2013 or 14, something like that. And of course, I hadn't read the comic because there was no available English comic at the time.
Yeah, it was almost unknown outside of France, I believe.
So, so where to start with this one? So, right off the bat, we've got a different cause. So, in this case, there was an attempt to fix the environment with chemicals. Literally spread through chemtrails. They tried to stop global warming, and it backfires, and it freezes the world.
Correct.
And all these people pile onto this train. The train was not. It is built to be self-sustaining, but only it was meant for like pleasure trips. It wasn't meant as
it's the dream of a single man, isn't it?
Right. It wasn't like a military escape vehicle. Yeah.
No, it wasn't a bolt hole for the people that. Well, maybe it was, but it's not. No, it's not like that, is it? It has a. It's more.
No.
It more grew out of the fantasies of Ed Harris's character, the designer.
Yeah. So right off the bat, from the first scene, we see the back of the train, which is something we never see in the comic. We see the filth and the squalor that they're living in.
It starts, right? That's all we see.
Yes.
At first.
Yes, and military guys from the front are interacting with the back, and they're like keeping them under control and distributing food. These food blocks, these protein blocks,
green jelly.
Yeah, they're like jelly protein blocks to them. So there's interaction between the front and the back regularly.
Enormous. They're clearly oppressed. Like there's a very the film from the get-go feels much more allegorical.
Yes.
Much more much more directly allegorical than the comic.
Yeah.
People are literally being preyed upon in the sense that they're oppressed.
Yeah.
They're fed these unappetizing looking blocks. They're treated like prisoners.
They're taking children away. We don't know why.
And not just children. Yet they also utilize them, which is not something that's occurring in the comic. They're just ignored in the comic, really.
Yeah.
They are a preyed upon underclass. So like the soldiers announce. They seek labor from them. They want violinists.
Yes, they need a violinist for a performance. Yes, right. So they ask all this. They go into the slum and they're like, "Does anybody here play the violin?" And then somebody raises their hand. I play for the Boston Philharmonic or whatever. They take that person away. It's like North Korea abducting movie directors from South Korea. Like, you're coming with us.
Yes, exactly. And they club. And they club people in the face and break their hands and all sorts of horrible, it's dehumanizing.
Oh yeah, and then when there's a shocking scene where somebody throws a shoe at somebody, and the Tilda Swinton as Minister Mason shows up.
Amazing.
Oh my God! So Tilda Swinton is a treasure. Every movie she's in, she is a treasure, and she shows up in this movie with this bonkers accent.
It's Yorkshire.
Yorkshire
accent, I can tell.
Is it who's that BBC censor, that woman from like the 70s and 80s? What was her name? Was it Whitehead?
Margaret Whitehouse.
Margaret Whitehouse. Was she trying to do... I felt like she was trying to kind of channel her... But I've never heard Margaret Whitehouse.
I thought it was a deliberate subversion because she's upper class, but she has this Yorkshire accent, which is associated with thugs and
yeah. So anyway, they have this system for punishing people, which is they have this kind of locking system where they expose this guy's arm, the guy who threw the shoe, and they stick it outside the train and lock it into place, and it's got to sit there for like a minute or something, and they pull it in and it's frozen. Yeah, that's right. And it freezes, and then they hammer it off.
And then they hit it with a hammer. It's crazy. So a punishment in no way commensurate with the crime, which was that he just threw a shoe.
Right.
He threw a shoe. It collected the lady in yellow.
Yeah.
On the forehead. She's the first color we see in the film is her.
Right.
She's wandering down from the front of the train. She's clearly
very bright yellow, like canary yellow jacket.
Yeah, so bright.
And everything else is brown, like brown gray colors.
They're so dirty.
Yeah.
Like they're filthy. I was really impressed with the with the makeup.
Yeah.
They look really squalid.
Yeah.
Like, they're absolutely filthy. They haven't bathed in like 17 years.
Yeah.
So great. Yes, but she's on the other hand clean, wearing bright yellow.
Yeah. And then Tilda Swinton shows up in blue, I think. And she's wearing like a fur coat.
Yep.
And she's everything about her performance is so eccentric. Like there's her accent and just the way. I wonder if she ad-libbed these speeches that she gives about how everything is supposed to be in a place, and she humiliates this guy by putting this shoe on his head.
Yeah. Meanwhile, whose arm is freezing outside the train.
His arm is freezing outside the train.
Yeah. She gives a speech which is one of the big themes of the film, which is that everyone has a place.
Yes.
In the society. It's the place of the people in the tail to stay in the tail.
And the camera lingers on these eccentric hand gestures that she makes.
Yeah. Yes, that's foreshadowing, isn't it?
Yeah, the first time I didn't pick up on it because I love it when like an eccentric performance actually pays off. Like there's a reason that it exists. And the first time I watched this movie 10 years ago, I was like, okay, this is just part because everything about her is so over the top. It's just one element of her. You don't think anything of it, really. Well, I don't know. You watched it for the first time, so maybe you had a different reaction. Yeah. But for me, I was just like, okay, it's just another weird thing. She wears a fur coat. She has this weird accent. She has these huge buck teeth. She was also an Okja, playing a completely different. You would never think it was the same human being playing both these roles.
Yeah.
But so.
But she gives a speech essentially about the need for what she calls balance. Right. And for people, and the idea of a righteous order.
Right.
Where she belongs at the top and they belong at the bottom.
Right. And so meanwhile, they've been planning this rush to the front as a group. They have a plan. They've been scheming at it because the main...
A revolution.
Right. Because this fellow, Curtis, who is our lead in this, played by Chris Evans...
really good. I thought he did fantastic.
He's really good in it. I think he struggles a bit with that speech at the end.
Yeah.
I think it was a little... maybe
I burst out laughing. I don't know if this is the time to say this, but I burst out laughing.
Yeah, it's a little bit outside of his range, maybe, but he's going to come up in like 4 or 5 of the movies that we're going to be talking about in this podcast.
Oh, great.
Because he keeps showing up in these comic movies, even before Marvel. Before they did the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he was in like 5 comic book movies.
The Human Torch. Anyway, so we're getting off track. Let's get back on this.
So he plays this character called Curtis. He answers to their leader is played by John Hurt as Gilliam, and he's missing an arm and a leg. We kind of assume for the first hour and a half of the movie that it's because he's been punished, and
yes, the same way
the other guy was
throwing the shoe.
So anyway, they're planning. He's been getting these secret messages from someone he doesn't know about, like they kind of give him hints about how to rush the front. He's like, okay, we can do this. They go forward a few cars. They break out this guy who's in jail, I think. Is he in jail? Yes, he's in jail.
Yep.
He was the guy that designed all the doors, the interlocking doors between cars. So they need him to help them get further ahead. He wants his daughter along. Her name is Yono, played by, I don't remember the actress's name, but it was the same little girl from the host.
Same actor from the host, yeah.
And it almost has the same... When we get to the ending, you can see that there's a lot of Bong Joon-ho fingerprints on this because thematically there's the same kind of thing about that girl rescuing a little boy. Is the same thing that happens in The Host, right? At the end, almost. So anyway, they rescue them. They're addicted to this drug called Cronol, I think they call it.
Cronol or Cronol?
Yeah, so
Cronol.
what it is, it's toxic waste that's been cut into cubes, and they sniff it, and they hallucinate.
Yep.
And I think this is like, I don't know how this works, because they want more cubes. They get to the next door, they want another cube. Which implies that the smell wears out, but Chris Evans is just walking around with them in his pocket. Like, they're not in any airtight container or anything, so I don't think this actually works. I think there's a bit of a plot finickiness here that it didn't quite add up.
Well, it's a fantasy drug, you know. He just wants more of it for each door. Like Chris Evans presumably is familiar with this drug because it exists in the tail carriages.
And in the front. They know it exists in the front. They know that the rich people...
it's not just a perversion of the rich, I mean, because the door guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy that designed...
Nom. Yeah.
Okay, he's from the elite. There's no middle class, unlike the comic, there's no middle class.
Right.
In Snowpiercer, the film, you just have these, despite them being mentioned in Tilda Swinton's speech, you don't see them.
Right.
They're not there. It's just the beautiful people, they're goons, and the filthy poor people in the tail end.
Right.
Anyway, where was I going? All right, so the drug doesn't just exist. It's not just a perversion of the rich. It exists in the tail end as well because, you know, Chris Evans' character, Curtis, is presumably familiar enough with it to ask an addict for some when he's as part of the plan. Right. Because he knows enough about Nam to bribe him with the Cronol or whatever it's called without being prompted. You know, it says on his drawer, like they're imprisoned in like cadaver drawers. Right. It says on his drawer that he's in there for being a Cronol addict. Ah, okay. Seems like an odd thing to punish him for since everybody seems to be addicted to Cronol. Right.
I suspect that he's actually in there because he knows about the locks.
Or it could be because of... Yes, well, exactly. Well, we might as well... What do we do? Do we keep...
We'll spoil it later. We'll spoil it a bit later. Okay. I think we should... I think we're going to have to spoil it.
I mean, people are not coming here, presumably, for a recounting of the plot.
I don't know why anybody's coming here yet. I mean, really, why does anyone come to any podcast? I don't know why I listen to podcasts.
I don't know why I record podcasts.
Yeah.
Well, all right, okay, I'll let you continue on, and we'll save that revelation.
Okay. Okay, so they rescue these guys. Then we have this kind of... it's like the Raid, except instead of going up through a tower, we're going through this train where they go through these various trains. The girl is a little bit psychic for some reason, which is never... It's a bit like a Japanese comic book where just a kid is just randomly psychic for no reason. Okay, there's a but it helps with... It's necessary. It's necessary for a plot reveal at the very end, because without her being psychic, we wouldn't have found out about that.
Yes, exactly. There's some metaphysical elements. I think the engine is a bit mystical.
Maybe we do have the religious element is in the movie as well, because they call it the sacred engine, and there's a bit of like worship of it as the thing that is keeping them alive.
I have some things to say about that eventually, but yes, I think they're she's just randomly psychic. That it's not really come back to. Is it caused by the Cronol? I don't know. Why does the engine?
Yeah, right.
The engine seems it's almost like as you say, it's almost like a god because. Like an Old Testament god, it needs to be sacrificed to.
Right. Okay, so we start moving through the cars. There's a bit of a character arc for Curtis where he doesn't want to be a leader. He doesn't see himself as a leader. Yeah. And a few of the other characters, this younger guy that he's always hanging out with who's like 17, 8 years old. Oh, we should mention, they're very specific about the timeline that the train's been running for 18 years.
Yes.
that fact comes up again and again, and some people are train babies if they're like 17 years old, and there's this guy that he's been hanging out with who wants him to be a leader, and also Gilliam, the John Hurt character, is like, you should be the leader.
Everyone's telling him to be the leader, but he doesn't want to be the leader.
Right, and there's an amazing... we should mention it's 2 hours and 5 minutes. There's a lot of big set pieces, and I've found that Bong Joon-ho in every movie is such a master of interlocking the plot and the theme. He puts it all together. I think the movie's a bit on the long end, but it's still like every part has its place. So we get to this set piece where they end up in a car. So they've been, because of her psychic abilities, they can tell what's in the next car. And it's like, okay, it gets clear, you can go through the next one, open the doors, do the same thing again and again. They discover that the protein they've been eating is like cockroaches or something, ground up.
Great scene.
Yeah, and so they finally get to one car where she's not quick enough, realizing that there's people on the other side for whatever reason. And, in fact, there's a whole bunch of guys there with axes. So a part of this is that Curtis has figured out that they don't have any bullets left. They've run out of bullets. That's part of the reason why they've decided to do the rush right now. So there's this huge axe fight, and then they're about to enter this tunnel. And there's a great kind of conceit of the plot is that they go on this is a round trip that takes exactly 1 year on this track that they're on. So they know when it's like Happy New Year, they're going through this tunnel. She kills the lights. They go through the tunnel. They all put on these infrared glasses, and there's this great first-person sequence where you see all the army have the infrared specs on, and the poor people are just like slashing wildly at nothing because they can't see anything. They're completely blind.
Yes. Well, there are a lot of yes, and then they bring torches.
Yes.
Up, don't they?
How do they know?
Curtis suddenly remembered.
How did they know to bring the torches from the back?
He has a flash where he thinks of the box of matches.
Yeah.
That the kid stole off.
And then he yells to the kid,
"Bring the fire!
Bring the fire!" But isn't the kid at the back? How can the kid hear him?
I think it's a bit. Yeah.
How did that even happen?
It's a bit of a problem. I think it's a bit of a. I read it when I was still a kid. When I was taking my notes, I wrote, why have you just remembered, just thought of this, and they're all prepared. Like the torches are all prepared, but right down the end of the train.
Right.
And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It is cool though. They come out.
It is cool. It's a great visual. Yep. But then because of this, like they've been decimated, literally down to like 10%. Like most of the crew's been killed off or badly wounded. Yep. So Gilliam, John Hurt, encourages Curtis to. Curtis is like, I can go up alone, because they've taken Minister
Mason.
Minister Mason. They've taken her hostage.
That's Tilda Swinton's character.
And she's so again, her speeches and her trying to get out of this are. I can't believe it. I cannot believe how great she is. I'm in disbelief. She's so great. Anyway, they take her hostage, and he's like, I can take her and a few people up. We should mention also that...
well, they want to secure the water room.
Right. We should also mention that Octavia Spencer is the mother of one of the kids that was abducted, and she is... Timmy, and she is awesome in this movie as well.
Yes. She wants to get Timmy back. So he's been abducted. Yeah. He's been taken up the train. She's looking for him. Curtis wants to reach the front of the train and take it over. They want to institute. That's why it's revolutionary. They want to institute a new order.
Right.
He wants Gilliam to be the leader and to run the train. Yes. I think Gilliam maybe has some kind of. Is it hinted early on that he had some kind of important role?
Yeah, somehow he knew, or maybe he was an old train driver. I don't know why, but they seem to think he would be able to run the train.
Yep. But he wants to secure the water, and of course they keep getting these messages.
Right, they're still getting messages as they're going through. They're like, water. Message comes in a little capsule. It says water, just one word. It's like, okay, we got to capture that means we have to. And it's like,
I read, and then Gilliam says, oh, we should, if we secure the water, we control the train.
Right.
And I remember thinking, that's dumb. They've been planning this revolution.
Yeah.
And they didn't think to take this water room, which Gilliam clearly knew about, until they get a little bullet with water written on it. Yeah. But of course.
And then they're gonna split up, and Gilliam tells
But it's important because it's all part of the...
He says, when you get to the front and you get to Wilford, cut out his tongue. Don't let him say anything to you. And you're like, you're like, oh, okay. But for me, again, like, everything was just, and like the hand emotions, it was just part of the, it was just woven in the tapestry. It was like, he was just saying, don't let him sweet talk you, because he'll try to talk you into something or talk you out of this revolution. Don't let him do it. Cut out his tongue is the way I read the delivery of that line.
Of course. What else would you think?
And then he gets killed. Not much later by the army guys. So that's how you buy them. Okay. Now we start to get into the crazier cars. Once they get past this point, and suddenly the movie explodes with color because we get into the botanical car, much like we did in the comic. We get to the aquarium car, which is just like going into an aquarium where you've got the tunnel and all the fish are around you. They get to a sushi car, where twice a year they get served sushi and they make Tilda eat the protein bar instead.
And why do they get sushi only twice a year? Because the aquarium has to stay in balance.
Yes.
They can't take too many fish out of it or the ecosystem
And they have to take the right type of fish out of it. It has to be exactly right.
So they only get sushi twice a year, in January and July.
Yeah. They get into a schoolhouse car, which is all primary colors. The teacher's this pregnant lady. There's kind of an awkward information dump where they watch a video that explains who created the train, how it came to be. She turns it off after 1 minute, as all school teachers do. And then shit kind of hits the fan because actually this guy comes through, and it turns out they do still have bullets.
Yes.
And now we get some more. A lot of bloody gun violence happens. And then they push their way kind of to the front of the train. They go through a nightclub car, where people are stoned out of their minds on the Chronol.
On the Chronol.
Finally, they get to the room before the engine room, and the Nam, the locksmith, is like, my plan is not to go into the engine. My plan is to blow open that door, and escape the train, because he has figured out that.
There's a final door. There's a final door before the engine.
The final door before the engine, because of the circuit, he has noticed that this one area in particular, seems to be melting. So he thinks actually it might be survivable outside. So he's like, I'm going to use this. The Chronol can be used as C4. He's going to shove it all together, and he's going to blow open the door. And like Curtis is like, no, I'm going in there. And then he's allowed in. The door just opens for him. He goes in. He meets.
They come out. They shoot Nam, who's getting ready to blow open the door. Well, Curtis gives his confession. But we find out why he doesn't want to take the leadership.
Right.
And it's because he's, much like Proloff, a murderous cannibal.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's a bit of this story about how Gilliam cut off his own arm so that Curtis wouldn't eat a baby.
He was about Curtis was
lurid.
About
This to me was very silly.
So so Curtis was about, the story here is Curtis was about to eat a baby. Gilliam stood up, cut off his own arm, and said, "Eat this instead. Don't eat the baby." And the baby was the kid that Curtis had been hanging out with earlier in the movie, and
yes, it was.
Partway through.
Yes, it was the one he had to abandon.
So actually, I have no problem with I didn't find it laughable.
Oh,
as you
I did. I guess I'm.
But I think
it just seems so silly. I couldn't visualize it. You just cut off his arm. Like you can't just pull off your arm and give it this. Like I just couldn't take it seriously. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He gives this big speech, and Chris Evans sells it as much as he can with the material. He lets the last cigarette in the world burn down, only taking a single drag from.
I'm gonna take the opposite, which is I think the material is good, and I think Chris Evans couldn't quite reach it.
Okay. I like that we think the complete opposite about that scene. That's good.
Yeah,
that's good. That's a kind of dichotomy which we're going to work with here on Comic Book Movie Oblivion.
Yeah, and Nam gives a counter speech.
He says, "I don't want to open this gate. I want to open."
Right. That's right.
Gates.
That's right. That's when he finally speaks. He gives a long speech. which through his translator.
Well, he reveals he's not an addict, right?
Right, that's right.
He collects the chronal not because he's addicted to it, but because it's an explosive. It's like a C4 equivalent, and he's going to use it to blow open the train because he believes that the world is not doomed.
Yeah.
He believes that the snow is melting.
Yeah.
And that people can survive on the outside of the train.
Yeah.
But then the door opens. Creepy yellow coat lady shoots the locksmith, Nam, although it doesn't seem to slow him down much. And
lots of people get shot in this and not killed and not slowed down. A certain assassin in particular. Heavy.
He's like the Terminator. He just keeps getting up.
Yeah.
And then there's that scene where they shoot each other across a windswept gulf through windows of the train.
A great set piece. Again, I don't know if it really. I don't know how good your aim would be on a moving train shooting into another car that's 1,000 cars away. But
another thing I couldn't take seriously, just really silly. It would be windy and it just wouldn't. That wouldn't work. It's. Anyway, whatever, it doesn't matter. Yeah. I like the action. A lot of as you say, the set pieces and the action in this, a lot of it was really good, really, really gripping and well shot. But that I couldn't take seriously. Anyway, sorry. So we'll return the reveal.
Okay, so we go in, we find out that Ed Harris is the engineer. Okay, that's a surprise in itself. And we find out that much like was it Matrix 2 or 3, they actually stirred this revolution to happen.
It was all planned.
And he was the one sending the little notes back to Curtis because he wanted to wipe out a percentage of the population to keep things
specific percentage. He had it calculated. They needed to get rid of 74% of the underclass.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing: the lives of the overclass were expendable as well.
Yes.
There's no remorse he says that it's good because it helps to maintain the balance.
Yeah.
She keeps talking about, and it comes back to the same thing that they said about the aquarium, the same thing that Minister Mason said at the start. It's important for the train to stay in balance in order for their environment to be maintained.
Yeah.
And of course, the big shock is that Gilliam was also in on the plan.
Right.
That he'd been conversing with.
Yes.
Wilford or Ed Harris's character.
And they weren't supposed to make it past that middle part.
No, they weren't.
And when Gilliam encouraged him to keep going, that was not part of the plan. And it also reveals why he told him to cut out his tongue.
Yes,
but
that's right.
This wasn't really intended to happen. So they get to the front, but also Yono comes in there and she notices something is under the floorboards, under the metal plates of the floor.
She uses her sense,
her psychic sense,
to pry up a floorboard. So I think Curtis is just about convinced, maybe. I think.
Yeah, that the balance
it was right.
Yes, that it was the right thing to do.
There had to be a balance, and that he's going to take over for Ed Harris, who's aging.
Which would put it similar to where the comic ended.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But then, of course, Yona comes in. She can sense something. She lifts up a floor plate, and we find out what's happened to the children.
It's the most horrifying moment in almost any movie.
They are incorporated into the machinery of the train.
Yeah, and so there's a weird, again, it's beginning, they're measuring the kids with a tape measure, and you don't know why, and you kind of forget it. And now we know they have to be small enough to fit into these cramped little compartments in the machinery, and they have to physically move their hands like Minister Mason was.
Yeah.
To pull
this twisting, pulling maneuver.
Pull, all that kind of stuff.
The engine can't die, but its parts can wear out, and they need to replace them with human parts, and they're literally children under 5. It's pretty horrifying. And then Curtis tries to pull Timmy out from where he is.
Yeah.
His arm is trapped in the machine. The machine groans. Curtis is obviously in a lot of pain. Part of the engine then opens up.
Yeah.
And the other little boy that was abducted gets in it. gets in the engine.
Yeah.
It's implied that he's fuel. And then hence this is like
I don't know,
this
but
engine
his hand was moving the same way too, and it made me wonder why Tilda Swinton's hand was moving in that way. Because surely she wasn't in one of those. She seemed too old to have been.
I think it's just a bit mystical. Like I think like the train.
Even Ed Harris does it. He does that hand motion too to talk about when he's talking about balance and stuff. But sorry, another one before. I just want to interject for 1 second. Another thing that I really love about this. The reveal that they wanted to kill off these people is that it casts Gilliam's self-sacrifice of his arm in a different light, because it means that you see that he sees killing all those people as being like cutting off an arm.
Yeah,
it's just a thing you do so that everyone else can live, so that the baby can live, cut off the arm, so that the train can live, kill the 74 down to 74% or 70% or whatever it was. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, actually, that hadn't occurred to me. To me, I thought that it was just that he wanted that baby to grow up and become a part for the train.
It's that, but now you understand part of his thinking is that that's the way he thinks. Is he's okay with,
Yes.
That kind of sacrifice.
So this fresh horror is too much for Curtis.
Yes.
This is the ultimate reveal that the train is not really an environment which anyone should be expected to exist in.
Yeah.
Because the engine runs on the suffering of children, basically. It's powered by the suffering of children, essentially.
Yeah. Yes.
It's like that short story by Ursula Le Guin, Those Who Walk Away from Omelas.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, so that's it. They decide that they have to leave the train.
Yeah.
And they
so they blow the door. Everybody dies except for Yono and Timmy.
Yeah.
And they go out into the snow. And so it's much like how she survived with that little boy in The Host.
Sure, that hadn't... Yeah. And then they're eaten by a polar bear.
They see a polar bear. Which is, again... I mean, it's a... How could they not have seen a polar bear in all their travels around the globe in the past 18 years? That something that was surviving in the wild.
You're being too literal. It's a sign, you see.
Yes, like of course, I'm being too literal.
Bringing back the olive branch.
The thing is,
it's a polar bear in a mountain for some reason, which is not where polar bears live.
Yeah. Well, so many of, I think, well, at least The Host and Parasite and Okja, or not Okja. So, and this one, at the end, you have a resolution, but you're not sure what's gonna follow. Is it gonna be? Are they gonna survive, or are they gonna die, or you don't really?
Yeah. Well, everyone else on the train.
There's a possibility of survival and hope at the end of many of these three movies of his. So that's and this is not something. This is completely different from the end of the comic, and you can see. That again, it's his fingerprints. That's like a Bong Joon-ho. Right. At the end, there's got to be a possibility of hope, but an unknown. Whereas in the comic, it just seems like the train's going to go until it slows down and he dies alone.
Yes. Well, everyone's dead on the train.
Everyone's
still
dead.
Driving it. He's like burdened with his sin, and he's traveling on in a tomb. Yeah. But in this one, of course, they leave, as you say, the train. And like a polar bear is an apex predator, so there has to be like quite a complex ecosystem to support a polar bear. Right. And like you pointed out, they didn't see this polar bear, but no one looks outside the train. The train is a self-contained. Only the locksmith looked outside the train. Yeah. He was the only one that cared enough to observe, because that's it. Like all of the stuff that they say is all about. There's nothing about leaving the train. The journey, the train is the world. Yes. And without the train, everybody dies. Yes. Yeah, and so the locksmith is a visionary in that respect, because he's the only one that cares about what's. Yeah, it's interesting too. Much like the comic. Well, I guess was it like the comic? Yeah. So when they come up through, when these filth these revolutionaries are covered in filth and blood, go through the first class cars, people just kind of look at them in shock, but just let them pass. Yes. It's nothing like because yes, it doesn't feel. It's not like the comic where people act like people. In the film, people act they act like the school teacher shoots, this heavily pregnant school teacher shoots people with a machine pistol.
Right.
The ravers ignore these filthy, filthy, extremely dangerous looking people just wandering through their rave party until they steal their drug. And then they become a grumpy army trying to kill them, maybe because they stole their drugs, maybe because they're just evil zombies and they're coming and it's the climax of the film.
Right. Yeah.
They doesn't matter who they are. They're not like real people. They're just these kind of caricatures.
Right. Well, I think it goes back to part of it's kind of the allegorical nature of it, because class concerns are, again, that even in The Host there was a bit of a class concern. Parasite is all about it, and this movie is all about it.
It's his shtick very much.
Yeah.
He's very concerned with kind of like social class and issues of income inequality and things like that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay, well, so did you have something else you wanted to add?
I'm ready to branch out on another tangent, but is there anything you want to say?
No, go on your tangent, and then we'll go into yays or nays.
Oh, okay, all right. I've just got a kind of brainwave here.
Okay.
I think now we established that Bong Joon-ho's thing is to write about social issues, specifically class issues.
Yeah.
But I think this film works better I think that the comic is very good at that.
Yeah.
I think the comic is a great kind of exploration of these kinds of social issues. I think the film less so.
Okay.
I think it works better as a different kind of science fiction story.
Okay.
Specifically, the story of a generation ship.
Right.
Which is a kind of well-established kind of science fiction genre, where you have a spaceship traveling the interstellar distances that take many human generations at a speed, below the speed of light. And there's quite a few of these stories. There's Non-Stop by Brian Aldiss is a good one. I think Captive Universe, Harry Harrison.
Yep.
Ursula Guin wrote a novella, the title of which I don't remember, but similar. And these kind of tend to have kind of common elements. Usually there'll be some kind of voyage of discovery in them, where someone within the generation ship is traveling around it and discovering things about it. So traveling from room to room and discovering wonders almost. Right. Usually there are secrets. So there'll be mysteries that need to be uncovered. So usually it's to do with the nature of the voyage. Okay. Usually people have forgotten that they're on a voyage.
Right.
They've forgotten that they're on a voyage, or they've forgotten that they're on a ship.
Right.
And they think the ship is the world. So they've either forgotten it or it's been suppressed by the people in charge. One more thing, themes of social engineering.
Yep.
So usually these ships will have maybe an artificial culture, one that the ship builders or the ship drivers have created so as to maintain the stasis that needs to exist while the ship is on the journey, while it's going from one destination to the other. Finally, the destination is the climax of the novel.
Right.
Usually once they've found out the secret, they arrive at the destination, or they take steps that make the arrival of the destination irreversible.
Right.
And I feel like that's a really good fit for Snowpiercer. It's courtesy, I was right. The
only thing is, the way it doesn't fit is that this has been within these people's lifetime. So Curtis was like 17, 18 years old when he got on the train. And now he's been living on it for 17 years. So they have a memory, and they can look out the windows and see the ruined world outside.
Yes, but no one does. Yeah, they do look at it, I agree. But they look at it, but they don't see it.
Right.
Ed Harris, he said this is the whole world.
Right.
And it needs to be preserved. And everything, the setup, the revolution, the messages, the shadow play of the fake rebellion in order to thin out the numbers, it's all done to maintain the stasis. It's an ideology that he perpetuates.
Yeah.
And and that's why the religion that's mentioned in the comic is missing from the film. Instead, I think you get more of an ideology. It's the ideology that keeps people in their place, and it's the ideology that's disseminated in the school through those videos and those songs.
Right.
And Wilford has created this ideology to ensure the sanctity of this voyage, because, I mean, in my conception of it, like they are on a destination, they are on a journey. The journey is to survive long enough for the biosphere to recover, for them to leave the train. But they've lost sight of that. Everyone on the train's lost sight of that, right? It's all just, except for the locksmith.
Yeah.
He's the only one that wants to, and he seems crazy at first.
Yeah.
But he's the one that's right.
Yeah.
They can and must leave the train, because living on the train has turned them all into like prisoners and monsters.
Yeah.
And I think that's different from the comic, where essentially they just recreate the outside society, and it's just a bit shitter because they live on a train.
Yeah.
With this, I think, and with this though, there's something new and grotesque, and it has to be studiously maintained from the top down.
Yeah.
And I think that, and so like, I really kind of liked that. I think that that's a cool lens to maybe rewatch or just consider the movie through.
Yeah.
You know, that was my great insight that I came.
That's a good insight. It's totally. I hadn't thought. Well, I guess I was thinking about that. Maybe I absorbed it that way. I guess you could say.
Anyway, thanks for indulging me in that little digression.
It was not a digression, and it was not indulgence. But let's do our yays and nays. Okay.
Very good.
Comic book, yay or nay?
Yay. That's great.
Yeah, I'm going to say yay, too, to the first volume, and I really wonder what those other volumes are like, especially if they start incorporating bits from the movie or even the TV show. I don't know. It seems strange to me, but I do think it's worth a read. It's a really interesting little parable and kind of cool, weird French science fiction story. I did dig it, so it's yay for me. Okay, movie yay or nay? I think quite obviously for me, as I said at the beginning, I love this movie. I loved watching it again. I will watch it again someday as well. I think he's such a great director. I love the way his themes come out, even if he wasn't. Well, he wrote the story for the movie, so
he did. You're right.
So
he read the comic apparently. He read it in a bookshop in Seoul.
Okay.
In 2005, he read it apparently in one sitting. He got so into it.
Okay.
And then decided then and there he was going to make a film of it.
Yeah. So I think the movie's just awesome. So what's your take on it?
It's also yay. I also like the movie. I think it's a bit messy conceptually.
Yeah, it's like, it's 2 hours 5 minutes, and a lot of it really.
It's very long.
I was watching the time, and when they arrive at the door in front of the engine where they meet Walt and Ed Harris, there's still a half-hour movie left.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's maybe there's 5, 7, 10 minutes of credits. I don't know, but still, it's like half an hour. I was remembering, oh, this is the last 5 minutes of movie. No, there's a lot of that conversation, but while it was going, I didn't feel like it was taking forever. But certainly, a lot of the gunfights and stuff probably could have been.
Yeah, it's a bit long. There's a range of actors. Like some of the actors are fantastic, and some I don't know where they. Some of the mooks, and that implacable man. He only has, I think, one line of dialogue, and he delivers it so funny.
Right.
It's like, out of bullets.
Right. Well, okay, but yes. But Octavia Spencer and. Tilda Swinton are just like, John Hurt's really great. And Harris is really good in it.
Yeah. Everybody's great. Yeah. The
girl that plays Yono is so good. And the Nam, I'm sorry,
he's fantastic.
I don't know their names. Even if I knew them, I couldn't pronounce them. They're all really great performances all around. So definitely now. Okay, adaptation. Yay or nay? Okay.
Well, I tossed this up. I've gone back and forth on this.
Okay.
But I think I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go with yay.
Okay.
Because I feel like he took the story and did something creative. There are a lot of the beats that are still the same, so it's clearly got a lot of the same beats, but he did something creative and different.
Yeah.
Spun it off into something different and entertaining.
Okay, so I think he's maintained a lot of the beats, like you said. and a lot of the themes, the finales couldn't be more different, because I think the comic is so nihilistic that I'm wondering if he kind of... I'm not sure how we should approach these yays or nays on the adaptations.
Well, we don't have to be consistent. I like that it's just a way to spur a bit of
my feeling is if I read this comic first and I was like, I love the bleakness, the fatalism of this ending, and then I went to this movie where they stood out in the beautiful snow and saw a polar bear, a sign of life and hope, I would be like, this is a focus group movie that is bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, it's an awesome movie.
And I did read the comic first, and I did kind of think that. I just thought, that polar bear is just going to eat them now. Right. I could see what it was going to do, but I just thought, oh man, a polar bear, what's it doing in the mountain? This is some goofy... But of course I thought about it a bit, and it's consistent with the themes. And themes, as you say, that weren't present in the comic.
Yeah.
And yet he's still able to match the comic for so many story beats and so many details, and yet to come to a completely different conclusion.
Yeah.
Yet it feels consistent.
Yeah.
I like this, and I like the idea of it as the train being a vehicle rather than a world.
Right.
That I really got a sense of in the film, whereas that's not very much what it is in the comic at all.
So I'm actually
it's just the world, a microcosm. Okay, go on. Sorry.
I'm gonna say nay. Because of the ending. And I mean, again, we're not answering to anyone.
No.
I don't have to look at it as somebody who read I saw the movie first. So yes. I don't have to try to put myself in the shoes of someone reading the comic first. There doesn't have to be any consistency in yay or nay from episode to episode. So just for the sake of it, I'm going to say nay because you said yay.
Great. Great. Excellent.
Okay.